She is one of 9 teens accused of being part of a plot to kill a fellow teenager. Corrine Belviso shared a GoFundMe link to help Trey Wright's family the day after his death, but then she was charged with his murder. And now she's accused of skipping town and allegedly breaking the rules that were laid down by the court. Prosecutors are not happy, and it could mean that she is about to go to jail. We're on the case presented by Law & Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Police say that Trey Wright was murdered after his girlfriend allegedly orchestrated a meetup with a teenager who she was in a love triangle with. And now that girlfriend and 8 other teens are accused of murder. Several of them accused of knowing that there was going to be a gun at this confrontation and allegedly knowing there was going to be violence. This is one of the teenagers facing charges of murder. Her name is Corrine Belviso. She is 18 years old, and she is one of these 9 teenagers charged with murder in this case. But in the days after the murder of 16-year-old Trey Wright in June of last year, you would have thought that Corrine Belviso was a close friend of his. I remember when we first started covering this story, we were researching the names of the teens that had been charged with murder. I typed her name into Facebook, and I had to do a double take when I saw this. So Wright was shot and killed, according to deputies, on June 24th, 2025 in Johnsonville, South Carolina. And the very next day, Corrine Belviso posted this on her Facebook page, a link to a GoFundMe page for Trey's family to cover funeral expenses with the caption, "They've made a GoFundMe to help Trey's family. If you're able to donate, anything will help. Trey was one of my friends. We're heartbroken. To know him was to love him. LLT." Now, LLT stands for Long Live Trey. It's been a rallying cry for his family, his friends, his support.
You can hear the disbelief in her voice. She had already seen what happened, and she didn't believe Karen for a second.
Reporters in the wake of his death. What was your reaction when you saw that?
I kind of figured it was going to happen because Corrine was trying to talk to me that night, but I had already figured out what happened, so I didn't want to hear anything from her. And she was just, she was like, I just rode here. I didn't do anything. I didn't believe it, not one bit, and I still don't believe it to this day. And then she tried to tell me that I didn't need to watch Trey get taken away in the ambulance. But I had already seen him shot and on the ground, so what's the ambulance going to do?
That is one of Trey Wright's closest friends, Jasmine. She was by his side after he was shot. Online court records show, weeks later, on August 5th, Belviso was charged with murder. Police say that Corrine Belviso didn't pull the trigger the night that Trey Wright was killed, but she was part of a group who knew what would happen, allegedly, when Trey Wright met up with the alleged shooter, a man named Devin Raper. This is a picture of Devin that we found on Facebook. Now, if you're just starting to follow this case with us, at the center of it is this law unique to South Carolina that we'll be talking about with our expert here in just a moment. And it is a law that allows prosecutors to charge someone like Corrine Belviso with the same crime as the person who allegedly pulled the trigger. Now,
as investigators started piecing everything together, the focus quickly shifted to the group accused of setting this up.
This is what happened when that alleged gunman, Devin Raper, faced a judge for the first time last year per WBTW.
I did not do none of this. There was 4 more people.
All right, I'm not here to try.
I understand that.
I'm not here to try your case, but you can speak to law enforcement and you can also talk to your attorney.
They won't talk. They didn't do nothing.
So everyone who's accused of murder in this case, other than Devin Raper, were granted bonds, and not exactly large bonds. Belviso posted a $20,000 bond the day after her arrest. She's been out ever since, but now she's accused of skipping town, and we'll have more on that. She is accused of going more than 1,300 miles away without the permission of the state of South Carolina. Prosecutors aren't happy about it. So I want to talk more about specifically what Corrine Belviso has allegedly been doing, where she's allegedly been going, and how it appears prosecutors found out that she was out of state. And that part of it we weren't expecting. But let's talk a little bit more about how we got here, because Trey Wright He's 16 years old, and his friends have told us that he was the type of person you just wanted to be around. Life of the party, great personality, someone who always had your back. And this is the last TikTok that he posted. He's dancing on a dirt road with a friend with the caption, "I'm just a girl. No, you're the reason I wake up and smile every day." Just seems like he was a really nice guy. Now, it's unclear if this is the girl he was talking about, Gianna Kistenmacher. She was allegedly his girlfriend on the night that he died. And we were told by one of his friends that he really liked Gianna. But she's the one who's accused of orchestrating the meetup that led to Trey's death.
This is the moment the case stopped being rumors and became real.
This is Kistenmacher in court in March. She is also out on bond on house arrest right now. She is also on GPS monitoring. Her attorney had her in court because he was requesting that her bond conditions be loosened, including an ask to get her back on social media. Here she is per WPDE television. Now, the judge, after this hearing, did rule to alter her bond conditions, allowing her to leave her house to go to work. Now, the bonds have been this point of contention in this case because there's been some criticism that some of the suspects are not taking them seriously, and Belviso is not the only one. So let's go back to June 24th. Florence County, South Carolina. There's a call that comes in at 11:30 that night, and deputies had to respond fast to a shooting. And when they got to the scene, that's when they find 16-year-old Trey Wright on the ground fighting for his life.
As soon as I came out the doors, he was already lying in the middle of the road. My dad was over top of him. He wasn't really performing CPR because he had seen that Trey got shot kind of where his lungs were.
That's Trey's friend. She told me that she and her dad were trying to save Trey when deputies arrived.
In that moment, all I could do was just go to Trey's side. He was gurgling and mumbling like he was trying to talk, but I had to kind of tell him that he was okay and everything was going to be okay, that he didn't need to try and say anything. He just needed to try and breathe and stay awake for us.
Trey was rushed to the hospital, and that's where he was pronounced dead. Court records describe, as you can imagine, a chaotic scene the night that he died. You had people who were crying and screaming as he lost his life. Now, detectives in this case, they have cast this wide net. Right now, you have 9 teens who are facing charges. The youngest, 15 and 16 years old. And 2 of the suspects have not been publicly identified, but all of these teens are charged with murder. But this is the one who authorities say pulled the trigger. Devin Raper. And at the time we're recording this, again, he's still the only one being held in jail as this case goes forward. What we know about Raper is that he and Wright were somewhat friends. They followed each other on social media. We were told that Trey considered Raper a friend. They didn't know each other for a long time, but they would hang out. They would go to truck shows in Myrtle Beach. Detectives say, though, on the night that Trey died, these 2 guys...
According to deputies, this confrontation may have been planned before anyone even arrived.
Were at odds. And they were at odds allegedly over Gianna Kistenmacher. The deputy said in his police report that when he got on scene, there were several people there. Some of them were distraught and emotional. Trey was on the ground. You had several people around him who were screaming. He had 2 close gunshot wounds to his chest. EMS rushes him to the hospital and he dies. Deputies say that they were told the shooter fled in a white Mazda SUV, and there were 4 people allegedly inside that vehicle, 1 with a gun, and was wearing a ski mask, according to police. Now, deputies say when the car first arrived, Trey Wright approached the vehicle. He banged on the door. Someone opened it, and that's when the gun was fired. The deputy also writes that the confrontation, it was planned and it was fueled, allegedly, by provocative Snapchat messages. Law enforcement also alleged there are recordings of the incident on some of the suspects' phones. Now, those images have not been made public. These are the 17s that we know about at this point who are facing these murder charges, each of them, again, facing a charge of murder. That's the same thing that Devin Raper is facing, even though law enforcement say he's the only one who fired a shot at Trey Wright. Now, for as serious as an accusation of murder may be, there have been some alleged examples that the case doesn't appear to be hitting the suspects as hard as you might think. Like these 2 suspects, 17-year-old Braylon Thompson, 17-year-old Jaden Eau Claire, both now out on bond. just like Belviso, just like Kistenmacher, they were granted $20,000 bonds, and court records show that both of them posted bond the same day. And we found this picture of a Snapchat post that was made by Thompson of him and Eau Claire outside the Florence County Detention Center, and it shows the two of them posing. Eau Claire's throwing up a peace sign, and then Thompson's got a finger in his mouth like he's got a grill, and the caption is, "I'm free." And there's a racial slur there that I can't say, but it begins with the letter N. Now, when we saw this, we contacted the Florence County Sheriff just to see if they were aware of this post. They responded to us very bluntly saying they were aware. So now prosecutors have apparently discovered that another
And prosecutors now believe one of the accused teens made a move that could completely change the case.
suspect, Corrine Belviso, has been, in their opinion, violating her conditions of bond, and they want that bond revoked. Prosecutors are alleging that Belviso left South Carolina for Western New York, and it's in a way that we didn't see coming. Belviso was apparently the victim of a crime, according to WPDE television, and prosecutors have a police report that shows that she left South Carolina last year when she was out on bond without permission. Now, the TV station says there is a deposition related to an alleged assault in October 2025 where Belviso allegedly states, quote, "I am currently transitioning from South Carolina to live in New York. I have been staying with family members on and off for the past 3 months." And on top of that, the local TV station says that they spoke to a woman in Niagara Falls whose son is friends with Belviso, and he is also the one who's allegedly charged with this crime in the assault case. And she reportedly says that she's seen Belviso nearly a dozen times since October 2025. And she claims that Belviso's been to her house, that she's worked at a bar, that she's been working for DoorDash. And in her words, quote, "She's everywhere." This is according to this woman that WPDE has spoken with. Now, prosecutors, in the wake of learning this information, have filed a motion to revoke Belviso's bond. This is what they write in that motion. Quote, "The state of South Carolina, through the undersigned as assistant solicitor for the 12th Judicial Circuit, hereby moves for an order of the circuit court revoking the bond of the defendant, Corrine Elizabeth Belviso, as previously issued on August 5th, 2025. The grounds for said motion being that the defendant is in violation of the bond by not complying with the conditions set forth in the bond. It has been brought to the state's attention that the defendant has traveled to and possibly residing in New York. The defendant's bond states that she must notify the court immediately of a change of address. It also states that she is not to depart the state of South Carolina without the permission of the court. The defendant was given a $20,000 surety bond placed on house arrest, where she is only allowed to leave her home to attend school, work, church, and to go to the hospital or doctor's office if necessary. This bond is for the crime of murder. The state believes that the defendant's bond should be revoked in light of the defendant violating the conditions of her bond. The state prays that the defendant's bond be revoked and that she be held in the Florence County Detention Center pending trial. Now, Belviso's attorney previously told local media that he was shocked that his client was even charged in the first place. And he apparently is swearing by her innocence in this. We have reached out to him for a comment on this recent development on her allegedly leaving the state, and prosecutors now filing this motion to have her bond revoked, and we are still waiting to hear back. Now, Trey's friend, who has spoken with us about this case, posted this on social media. Quote, "I think all these disgusting people's bonds should be revoked. They all think that this is a joke, and the state has been doing nothing. We've had to push so hard for this to come to light and something be done." Join us now to talk more about this from South Carolina is civil rights attorney, criminal defense attorney Tyler Bailey. Thanks for being here. This might sound like somewhat of a rhetorical question, but if she actually did leave to go to New York and all of that is true, like, how does the court look upon someone who does that when they have bond conditions on a pretty serious charge that says you need to stay in South Carolina?
The court looks at it like she thinks she may be above the law, or she's not taking the case as serious as she should. This is a murder case, and she's in New York. It's not like she was even in Georgia, Charlotte, or down in up in North Carolina. She was in New York, and it looks like she had intentions on permanently leaving the state of South Carolina. So the courts don't look on this highly. And when you have a serious charge, you got a family that's grieving, you got a person who lost his life, the court expects people to take those bond conditions seriously.
And prosecutors, in the motion that they filed, I mean, it is in capital letters that she is charged with murder. This is not, a misdemeanor case or something like that. I mean, it's a very serious charge that she's facing in these situations where, because prosecutors say like she had made all her court appearances, but she's on house arrest. She's only supposed to be able to leave the house for, very specific reasons. But typically, like, how do you make sure someone is actually where they say they're going to be, or told where they're going to be in a situation like this?
In South Carolina, it's a general stipulation of bond conditions that you're not supposed to leave the state unless you have prior consent of the prosecution, and the court has to sign off on you having your bond conditions amended. And ironically, she's in Niagara Falls, right by the border of Canada. And when you have serious charges, one of the things that the court considers when issuing bond is being a flight risk and the nature of the offense they're accused of committing. And when you have, you could go to jail for a long time for murder. This is not a speeding ticket. And so with this being a murder, she was not under any GPS monitoring conditions. So defendants are given at least the respect to think they'll take the case seriously, and they're not going to be, all over the world here. And so they don't check regularly. You make your court appearances, which shows that you assume that they're in the state and they're complying. But oftentimes people are caught up when they get criminal charges in another state. There's something that puts the prosecution on notice, and then prosecutors can move to revoke bond from there.
For moving forward, so they file this motion. I'm sure there's going to be a hearing to determine whether or not she'll have her bond revoked. The state wants her in the Florence County jail as this moves forward. What's the argument potentially for your defense if there is proof that she has more than once? WPDE, the television station, spoke to someone who says that she's been, quote, everywhere up in New York and has been working a job there even. Like, if all of that's true, like, what is the argument a defense attorney could make to try and keep her out of jail?
You never want to have to go to court begging for mercy, but this is one of those ones where the judge the defense lawyer should talk about her being a young lady. She has since moved back to South Carolina, being able to prove, here's her address, here's where she's moving. She resigned from her job, and maybe tossing the state of bone saying we'll consent to GPS monitoring. That way there'll be some oversight to ensure that she's in the state, because there's really no excuse for a murder suspect to have disregarded the bond conditions and testified at a deposition that she was moving to New York, knowing that she's out on bond for murder in South Carolina.
How does that impact the argument? Because it's not just like, oh, someone snapped a picture of her and she was working at a restaurant, or she was their DoorDash driver or something like that. I mean, she apparently, based off of what happened in New York, and I haven't been able to get the documents out of the Niagara Falls area as of yet, but according to this TV station in South Carolina, there's a deposition related to an assault in October of last year. And and I'll just pull it up, her words, see if I have it right here. Of course, when I bring this up, like, I don't have it right in front of me, but quote, I am currently transitioning from South Carolina to live in New York. I have been staying with family members on and off for the 3 months. Like, when you have that in ink in a deposition, how does that impact if you're the defense attorney and you have to go into court and try and keep her out of jail?
You never also want to try to rely on ignorance. Some people could try to say, well, she didn't know, but ignorance is never excused for the law. You're put on notice. She received her bond conditions when she was let out in jail on bond. And so if anything, the defense lawyer could try to really just say, judge, either try to get agreement with the prosecution on her, what stipulated conditions for a bond could be, which the only thing outside of jail that seems to be able to keep her in the state may be GPS monitoring, and try to hope that the court takes that agreement and honors it. But it sounds like the state is saying that the only thing that's going to ensure that she goes by her conditions of bond, if she sits in jail until the case comes to a conclusion, she has a trial where she's either acquitted or found guilty. And so there's really not a lot of wiggle room for the defense here. And their best bet is trying to see if they can get the state to consent to an agreement to present to the judge. And the judge could still say, I don't think anything's going to keep this individual here in the state to make sure she's complying with bond. I'm going to sit her down in jail while this case is pending.
The most important detail here is that prosecutors believe everyone involved shares responsibility, even if only one person pulled the trigger.
A lot of people who have followed this story know the law that's kind of at the center of it in South Carolina, and we've talked about it before. But you certainly see the headline, and you see that 9 teenagers are charged with the death of one person. And you have Corrine Belviso, you have the others who are charged in this. They are not accused of being the person to pull the trigger. The only person who is accused of firing the shots is Devin Raper, and he is currently being held without bond. For people just joining us on this, the hand of one, hands of all law in South Carolina, what does that pertain as far as looking at this case?
It means that other individuals can be charged with the main culprit in a crime, whether that's a murder here, if they were with the main defendant who went there, who was accused of committing this murder and shooting the firearm, they could also be charged. The only way really to prevent oftentimes being charged with the hands of one, the hands of all, is completely separating yourself from the situation. If they got out the vehicle and left, maybe call law enforcement, completely disengaged, this would be more of a stretch of an argument. But here, between the text messages, social media commentary, them actually getting in the vehicle, driving with them, helping Raper get to the scene where this murder happened, the prosecution took a bold position and charged them all with the murder and not with accessory before the fact or after the fact. They're saying that they are just as culpable as the main shooter in this case. And the law in South Carolina.
What we know, at this point, there's apparently some social media messages. There are allegedly, there's recording of the confrontation that led to Trey Wright's murder. When you've seen that law used in South Carolina in the past, like, how strong of a case with what we know to this point does it appear prosecutors have in making the argument that someone like Corrine Belviso should be found guilty of murder in the same way that Devin Raper could potentially be found guilty of murder, and he's the one who fired the shots?
Their case is getting stronger because you have these defendants who are out on bond who are showing some audacity. They're showing that they seem like they don't care about what the law says. Generally, it's hard to prove when you have people who, for lack of better words here, are innocent. They weren't the main shooter who was actually fired the weapon here. But it seems that they did not take this as seriously, and they're still continuing to not take it seriously. The evidence shows that they did know what Raper said he was going to do, and that they went with him and took him there. They participated in at least the transportation and assisting this duel, for lack of better words, that happened between the deceased and the defendant here. And generally, usually that's a harder case to prove. But I think now the state is probably believing that these witnesses and defendants probably will present more poorly in front of a jury because they are appearing to not care about the law. And it's still a hard case to prove for the state, but they seem to have some defendants who aren't making their defense any better by the way they've been acting while they've been out on bond.
Because you also look at the bonds themselves, and Corrine Belviso was able to post a $20,000 bond. It was a surety bond, which feels, compared to a lot of murder cases that we cover, it's, even just getting a bond in some states, it's lucky for someone to be able to get out. But I mean, she wasn't even on GPS monitoring. What do you make of how she's accused of murder? And if this is the law prosecutors are going for, but then it seems the court isn't really treating her or some of the other defendants at this point like they're actually charged with murder when you look at bonds like this.
We talked about this bond when it was set and how it was somewhat unprecedented for a murder case, for bonds that are so low and stipulations that are so lenient. And I think now the court is going to probably take this a lot more serious, and she has a real strong chance, I believe, in being put in jail until this case comes to a conclusion. This case, from the inception, although they were not a lot of the players were not the actual shooters, they're being charged in the theory of hand of one, hand of all. You still had a murder charge which makes the defendant's quote unquote flight risk just by the nature of the penalty that they will be subject to if they are found guilty, which gives the people, could give a regular person motive to flee. And so when you have a low bond, no GPS monitoring, it doesn't seem like that was in the best interest of the community for the family seeing some actual accountability for justice. And they have the state is now having to reel her back in from New York. Who says she even comes back? She could just flee now. She's right by Canada. And so these are things that the state is going to bring up, that she needs to be in jail. And that way we know that she's not going to flee, that she's going to stay in the state. So I think the court is going to look at this, and by no means do I think it will be a situation where a judge at the bare minimum would not put a GPS monitor on her ankle to at least say that we could have another third party who can oversee where she is. And if they want to send the message here, the message that probably should have been set when they went up for bond the first time, that message would be to sit her down in jail until this case goes to trial. And I'm a defense lawyer saying that.
Right. No, absolutely. Because I'm sure you look at this and you've seen people that have been held without bond for, that aren't given the type of situation where it's like she wasn't even on GPS monitoring. And apparently, according to this woman in Niagara Falls, New York, she has worked at a bar. She's a DoorDash driver. Quote, she is everywhere, says this woman. And she also says that Corrine Belviso allegedly has been to this woman's house multiple times, nearly a dozen times, since just October 2025, when this alleged assault took place, according to ABC News 4 in South Carolina. So if this ends up going to trial, how does this bond issue, is this something that prosecutors can use? Is this something that can be entered into the narrative that you would give a jury, that this is a person who should be held accountable to the same level as the shooter? And once she was hit with this murder charge, you could argue it didn't really faze her. She just seems to have gone on with her regular life and didn't really care if all of this is true about the fact that the state said, hey, stay at your house for, unless you have a doctor's appointment or something like that.
You sound like a good prosecutor over there, but
I'm trying. I've been working on this a little bit, so yeah.
The prosecution would definitely try to get her conduct into evidence. The defense would try to keep it out and say it's irrelevant and it's highly prejudicial to be used against her to present a case that she should be found guilty of the murder. But it shows her it's her actual conduct that can be used against her, I believe, in some way, showing what she has done while she's been out on bond. She hasn't been compliant. She was in another state. She's made statements under oath. So it sounds like she took a deposition, and a statement made under oath can be admitted in another proceeding. So I don't see how it can be kept out unless the defense is able to convince the judge that's too prejudicial to come into evidence. And that is a chance. And we'll see if it goes to trial. But if it goes to trial, the prosecution will certainly try to get this fact pattern into evidence.
And we'll see what happens. There's still a lot that we don't know specifically about. We know that prosecutors believe that someone like Corrine Belviso, that they were aware that there was going to be violence if and when Trey Wright and Devin Raper got together that night. But the specifics, there's still a lot that needs to be released as this continues to go forward. It's been going on since June of last year. Tyler Bailey, civil rights attorney, criminal defense attorney, thank you as always for taking the time to be with us on Law&Crime. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. We're also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. See you next time.